of the earth. Pope Francis already last May issued a teaching document addressed to Catholics, but to all people of goodwill, encouraging us to care for the earth and making the connections between the faith community and the earth community and the air community and the water community. For sometimes those two communities, the environmental community and the faith communities, have not been connected. But he's really pushing all of us to make that connection. I was just watching Pope Francis is in the Central Africa Republic right now. And I watched earlier this morning a talk he was giving to a great crowd of young people. The Central Africa Republic is engaged in a lot of conflict and war, specifically among faith groups, Muslim and Christian. And Pope Francis would talk to these young people, and it reminded me of, he talked about the war and the violence that they're living in. And I couldn't help thinking about coming here a little bit later this afternoon, that we also, I think, are involved in a kind of war. There's a war going on in this earth against the earth and the air and the water, and it is a kind of war. It is a kind of horrible violence. And Pope Francis, as he's addressing these kids, these young people, this future of the African nation, is telling them to have hope. And one of the things he tells them is to resist. To resist in your heart and in your body and your everything you can, to resist violence. To resist the violence of the air, of the earth, of the pollution of other people. And to find within yourself the resources to make strong that resistance. I think that's a good word for us today, and my goodness, we have resisted the water and the rain so far. Resist. Finally, just a word, Pope Francis sent his shoes. You heard that in Paris, because the march was canceled because of the violence there was a massive amount. People sent shoes on the plaza. There were hundreds and hundreds and thousands of shoes. So I saw a picture today that Pope Francis sent his old black shoes, and they're right there. Yay. Finally, the final word that I want to say about Pope Francis, and I think it's good for all of us, he says, you know, we got to take to the streets. We got to take to the streets.
That's right. Yes.
And that's what we have to do when we're engaged in a serious war. Let us do it together. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for being out here. Stephen Fuqua from Dallas Interfaith Power and Light. And for those of you who haven't heard of Interfaith Power and Light before, started in the 90s as a religious response to global warming. That's their slogan. Here in Dallas, we like to talk about why faith communities would be responding to climate change. We talk about love, justice, and care for creation being three of the reasons that we try to come together and get the faith communities to respond to this, both within their institutions, at their churches, synagogues, mosques, etc., and within the rest of the wider community and policy. So Interfaith Power and Light, we've been active here in Dallas for about 3 years. I see a few faces I know out here. And we do have another event coming up later this week on Thursday evening, 7 o'clock at Midway Hills Christian Church. We have a prayer vigil for the climate negotiations, and we have a couple folks over in Paris who will be doing a live feedback with us to share with us what is actually going on the ground there. So it'd be a great opportunity to kind of hear directly from some folks who are there in Paris at the stakeholder gatherings. So thank you for being out here, and I'll pass it on.